All right. Welcome back, everybody, to another Future Focus, where we are living at the intersection of business technology and the human experience. I am very much looking forward to today's discussion, which I'll get to in a second. But if you are not already subscribed to the Substack, please do so, because if you miss any of this, you'll get the Cliff Notes version of it once a week, because I always make one of those just to make it easier for you, and it's super easy. So go check that out. But I'm looking forward to this one. I'm going to be talking with Matt Creighton, who is the founder and principal at Publitics. We're going to be talking about a really important topic, which is social media and its impact on society, what that means, what we do, what the future holds. And I have a feeling it's going to be a spicy conversation like mine are all the time. And I always enjoy this stuff. So Matt, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
Hey, well, I've gotten the chance to get to know you through this whole process and truly have enjoyed all of our dialogues. It truly has been a pleasure. And now I've gotten to know you, others don't. So you're obviously in the PR space, the space you play in, but tell me a little bit about your background. How'd you end up getting there?
So I like to say that it's a very millennial type story, how I got here. So
I want to hear what a millennial type story. I'm really curious what that means.
Right. So here we go. So it was back in the mid 2000s. Like the kids. By the way, I just need to throw this out there. Someone said to my face, and I've heard this said before, but refer to the 1990s as the late 1900s. And I was like, what is going on with that? I'm like, wow. I'm really earning my gray hair here.
Yeah. Wow.
I'm earning the gray. So like, what is going on?
That's terrifying if we're calling the 90s the late 1900s. But I guess technically they're wrong. Right.
They are right. Yeah, I know. That was like a little bit of like Gen Z.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I'm going to stick it to this millennial. The late 1900s. So I had sort of an interesting path to where I ended up. So initially, I went to college, thought I was going to be a teacher, high school history teacher, went through the whole thing, did history, political science undergrad, got a master's degree in education, did my student teaching.
Oh, you went all the way to master's too.
I
was a math and science or math and computer science teacher for middle schoolers. I did the undergrad, didn't go straight through to grad school.
I did, yeah. So it was actually a 5-year program. So I just went like powered right through. Yeah, it was convenient. It would have been great. But in 2008, something happened, which was a financial crisis. Yeah, I wonder what. So a historic event, which
way back then, in the old times or whatever.
Back in my day when the subprime mortgage bubble burst.
Yeah.
So that resulted in, so I graduated in 2010 with the bachelor's, 2011 with the master's, but 2008 kind of roiled the markets, roiled financing and funding for public education in our state. So we had a governor at the time who cut funding across the board. So I had graduated like many people in my position. I was putting resumes every day to different schools, sent out hundreds, right? Probably.
Yeah. And they're like, sorry, there's nothing for you.
Not even a response, actually, in most cases. It was.
That's even more encouraging.
Yeah. This is before like the algorithms really kicked in, reading resumes and stuff. And there were real human beings. But so essentially what would happen is you'd put a resume in and you'd be up against, 50 other teachers, a handful in your position that are just coming right out of college, and then a handful or many more actually who had like 5 to 7 years of experience. So at the end of the day, if you're making a hiring decision at a school, you're going to take the person who's got 5 to 7 years experience and really good references, and by no fault of their own was laid off during the financial crisis. So at that point, I was like, oh man, what am I going to do with my life? So then I went to a second sort of career choice, which was take the first job that I was offered. Which
is kind of one of those things you kind of have to do right in those years where you're like, well, I guess I'll just do whatever.
That's exactly what happens. So I was like, all right, well, let's wing it, shoot from the hip, see what happens. So I ended up doing, this was pretty wild, doing alumni affairs for the college that I graduated from.
Okay.
They created 2 new positions and hired two of us. There were two campuses at the university I went to, and they hired one person from each campus to come in and interface with young alumni.
Okay.
Now, part of that job was trying to raise money from young alumni.
That's the part they don't often tell you about.
They did not, nor did they totally prepare me for the types of responses. So essentially, we shared this office that was the size of a closet. You know, we had two desks in there and two phones, and you would sit there with a list of people, and you'd call through that list of people every single day.
And they were warm and inviting, and so happy to be having this conversation.
Oh yeah, and very eager to open their wallets.
Very eager. How much can I? Is that all? Can I double that?
Yeah, can I double that? You know, I know I've got student loans, but I would really like to drain my life savings to contribute to this
in a financial crisis.
Yeah. It's like, oh, you know what? Who needs dinner?
Yeah.
Let's just make a donation, right? So yeah, as you can imagine, I got some pretty colorful and quite frankly creative responses to, and it, in all fairness, I mean, like I probably would have responded the same way, but it was like a lot of rejection. So that whole job lasted for 10 months before the board of trustees decided that it wasn't worth it anymore. We weren't raising money, and it wasn't, you know, worth paying our salaries and benefits, or fairly modest salaries and benefits at that point. So we got laid off 10 months into my first job, and it's like, oh man, I hate this. This is the worst feeling ever. So I thought, you know what? Why don't I try to start my own business? That sounds crazy, right? Absolutely.
Well, I mean, insane. I guess I think for a lot of people it would, but I guess it's one of those, given the experiences, like my original plan was, didn't go according to plan. I went into this other thing and that lasted 10 months and then I got laid off. I don't know. To me, that's kind of a recipe for like, I guess, why not?
Yeah, I mean, that was sort of the calculus at that point. So I was like, all right, well, let's give it a shot. And I had always had some interest in politics communication. So I did political science as part of my undergrad. And then also as a graduate assistantship during grad school, worked at the Public Mind Poll, which was a polling institute at Fairleigh Dickinson University, which is where I was going. So they would do polling on various issues, measure public opinion on different elected officials, approval ratings, see whether or not people approve or disapprove of particular, policy. So I really got an entree into how to understand voter behavior, consumer behavior, because some of the polling was consumer focused as well. So it was sort of an interesting thing that I did, and was a lot of fun at the time, but I didn't realize that I was going to end up utilizing that later in life. And by later, I mean a few short years later. So I thought, all right, let's go into politics. And I'm young, so what would a campaign trust me to do with no experience whatsoever? So I'm like, well, I'm going to tell them I do social media. So in 2008,
smart move, honestly, smart move, actually, because it's like, well, what are they going to say? They don't know enough about it necessarily to go, I don't think so.
that was the plan. And I think the environment at that point was what we have today would have been pretty inconceivable in at that point, which was 2011, 2012. So in 2008, just to back up a little bit, during the first Obama campaign, that is when these digital tools really took center stage in a presidential campaign in a big way. So prior to that, like Howard Dean, had pioneered some like email marketing and different, smaller pieces of that, but social media was not as big a factor as it was in 2008. And then Facebook.
No, because I mean, if you really think about it, it still was in its infancy in that
very
time.
Much.
I mean, if Facebook had graduated, may have just started. Yeah, it had just kind of come out of the graduation of, well, it was closed, only certain schools. I mean, I was in college when it was like, ooh, is your school on Facebook yet?
Mm-hmm.
Tell you, there was the MySpace before that, but that wasn't exactly where you went to get your political news.
No, not at all. So I was on MySpace. I loved MySpace. So in high school,
Tom was great.
Tom, everyone's friend, right? Like
I know.
Yeah. Like we were talking about before, like, oh, I know this person. It's like, it felt like I knew Tom. We were we were close. But so so Facebook was starting to become a tool that campaigns were using, and actually, as I was graduating from high school, that's when Facebook was opening up to non-college, or actually, I'm sorry, more non-Ivy League colleges, right? So it started to expand, and then beyond that, it was pretty much everyone by, I think, 2008. But there were still, you could still get a ton of organic reach on there, on pages, and the news feed was really starting to take shape with likes and shares and all of those different pieces. So fast forward to 2012, again, right back in focus with that, and then Twitter started to become a thing. At that, I believe Twitter started right in 2012.
Yes. It was like right in that. It was like right when the social media bubble was booming.
Yeah, it started to become a thing. So at that point, I was like, you know what, I'm young. People think that young people can navigate social media, so I'm just going to go in and find a couple campaigns. Specifically, I was looking for a campaign too that I thought would be likely to lose, because they're willing to take a chance on someone like me. So in the campaign world, like if you're talking about like the competitive, like targeted races that are super intense, and both sides are trying to win, and there's a good chance, and they're well funded, they're never going to hire.
They're never going to be like, hey, you have no experience, you're brand new, you don't even have.
Come on in,
come on in. You
can
run our social media strategy.
Exactly. So I looked for a couple campaigns that I thought were going to lose. We ended up winning a local race that we did, and then we ended up doing some pretty cool stuff with a congressional campaign that we did. But that sort of got me started in the social media.
You cut your teeth. You cut your teeth on it. Which
we got to try
was kind of a good time to do it, because I actually was just looking. Twitter started in 2006, but it really gained momentum in 2012 is when it hit 100 million users. So by that, it was kind of in that same Facebook cycle where it was really gaining momentum.
Absolutely. So I got all sorts of experience in that. We were able to try a whole bunch of different stuff on those campaigns.
There was no like master class you could take on it. So it was like, I don't know, let's give this a whirl.
None, no. Other than having paid attention to what happened in 2008 and what was going on currently in 2012 with some of the campaigns, and trying to figure out what their secret sauce was. Other than that, there was nothing. I mean, there was no instruction manual. I mean, there may have been like For Dummies book out at that point, but it's like those things change. Everything was changing rapidly. So that's sort of how I got my start in the digital media space, specifically related to politics, and then just kept going, and through some luck, some networking, some hard work, trying to really figure out what made voters tick, and what people responded to on the internet.
You were able to see, and I think this is the part that will be really interesting to dig into some of this. You start to see some of the connections between human behavior and the way people operate, and some of the good things that come with that and the bad things that can come with that through this. And I guess, again, you're also doing it through a political lens, which also can carry all sorts of depth charges, I guess you would. I mean, there's the potential for things to go sideways.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. I mean, one of the things that we started to realize,
you don't pick easy challenges. I'll give you that.
No.
First off, you're like, I'm going to sell, ask brand new alumni to donate to schools. And then I'm going to jump into social media on politics right out of the gate. There you go. I like it.
Yeah. Let's get in it. Yeah. Let's mix it up. Yeah. So it was good. Like, so I feel like looking back, it's like a little like that felt insane, but looking back, it was a lot of really good experience, because that also, like, a lot of the political work really helped me. And then, once our team started growing at Publitix, we were able to translate that experience to other sectors. But getting back to like looking at social media and how that was developing. I mean, one of the things that I started to notice, and a lot of people started to notice early on, is that if you posted something that made people angry in some way, it would go viral.
Okay.
Or was surprising or funny, right? Like those were the three categories. So it's like, so the algorithms really, like, even at that point, were making decisions about what sort of content, it wanted to surface to users. And it's only become more of a filter bubble since then, right? So so back in 2012, you would still see some stuff from the other side, right? Like even if you weren't all that interested in it, you would still get some exposure to those things. Since then, the algorithms essentially are trained to serve you stuff that will keep you engaged in that platform. And if you're seeing a whole bunch of stuff that you don't agree with, or you just simply don't like, then it's not going to serve you that stuff, because it doesn't work to keep you engaged in the platform. So that was an interesting thing that we started to see. And again, like, I mean, that wasn't a novel realization on my part or anyone else.
No, but I can imagine the amount of data that these companies were gathering in the early days, especially on, I mean, the social media thing took off with young adults, and you really would start to see the trends. I mean, I still remember when Facebook was like, and like, that's how it started, was you're just saying like what you were doing constantly. And then that evolved into, well, now you were actually, but even with that, I remember the early days of Facebook, you would learn how to play the algorithm, even in its infancy, of like, well, if I say something, to your point, that might make people angry or surprise them or make them laugh, it went further then, but not to the degree we see today.
No, certainly not. And the advent of the like button in particular on Facebook changed things. The adjustment of what specific colors or how the animations played out while you were clicking that button, like all of those things had measurable effects on how much people would engage with content, would stay on the platform or any platform. So it's like these little tiny things that you and I don't think about, but it's like the shade of blue that you use, or the color that you use to indicate one thing or the other in a platform, or whether or not something flashes when you click it, or is it just sort of like a flat icon. And I mean, there are all sorts of like little tiny tweaks that make a huge difference in how people engage with stuff. And then of course there is the content of the content, right? Like what is it saying, and what does it do to you psychologically? So so that's sort of how things kind of have evolved over the years. So that kind of, puts me at today, where, we do like as a company, we're full service, right? So we do communications across platforms. We're platform agnostic. So we got a digital first start, but we do everything from like media relations to influencer, management and engagement, to just like straight digital media. It's more legacy stuff, even direct mail. We still do out of home. Like there are all sorts of different things. So we're kind of platform agnostic, and we also do like a lot of strategy work as well. But digital is sort of the thread that kind of pulls everything together in some ways. But yeah, that's how I got my start. And I've been pretty obsessed with it ever since, just trying to figure out what makes all of it tick. And, we've gone from the Wild West to like a different version of the Wild West, I feel like,
well, that's where I'm actually curious, having been in it the whole time and through a lens that I think a lot of people wouldn't see. To your point, maybe a lot of people have been on social media a lot, but they don't necessarily think and understand the strategic component of it or how it works and all this stuff. Just kind of like, there's a lot of assumptions that Gen Z, they're all super good with tech. And it's like, well, just because they know how to use an iPhone and walk around with, AirPods in, doesn't mean they're good with tech necessarily, type of a thing. But I'm curious, out of there, let's start with some of the good things that you saw. Cause I actually am really curious, like, were there some things that you saw as the technology evolved that you went, hey, this is actually really cool, really powerful, really helpful for things?
Absolutely. So there are two sides to every coin. And I think one of the good things, societally speaking, is that social media lowered the barrier to connection with other people across the globe, across the country, even in certain countries where communication was not previously, or communication online or free expression was not allowed. Social media created an avenue for that expression in certain places that led to positive changes in some ways. It also, like from a political perspective, just thinking in my own experience, early on, access to social media lowered the barrier to entry for people to get into political campaigns. I mean, and that only lasted. I mean, that still holds true, but it's become a more crowded communication space than
it's like if you get it there on the early days, you really, the access is greater and then it gets diluted over time.
Absolutely. It's sort of like becoming like a YouTube YouTube superstar, right? Or something like that. Like it's almost always easier to be one of the first than to try now. Like if you were to try now, it's an incredibly crowded space. I was actually talking with someone yesterday who does
YouTube's tough.
YouTube in particular, and I use that as an example because that was one of the earlier platforms on the block. And I was actually talking to someone about this yesterday who works in talent management, specifically in the sports side of things. We were just talking about, I was actually playing golf, and we were talking about the proliferation of like golf content on YouTube. And like, there are a lot of very good creators on there, but if you wanted to start today creating golf content, like on YouTube or any of these platforms, it'd be very hard to break into it because it's such a saturated market. So like the first ones on there are doing quite well. The ones that already had a bit of an audience and for different reasons do quite well. But beyond that, it's very hard to crack into it. And it was the same thing with political campaigns. So initially it provided a platform for people who may not have had access to the same kind of funding that other candidates had at one point. And good candidates in some cases too, like people who have a lot to offer the process, but didn't have that
that nobody would have paid attention to
100%
whatsoever. But because now social media democratized access to people, suddenly these people who would have gone completely unnoticed, suddenly people were like, hey, who is this person? Like, I'm actually really interested in what they have to say and things like that.
Absolutely. So it gave an opportunity for a more diverse voices to get into the conversation. And then as that space became more crowded, it's harder to grab attention there. So like there are a few that every cycle will go viral for some content that they put together, which is quite good. I mean, they do a really good job, and the ones that go viral do quite well. They're able to raise enough money to compete and do all of those things. But earlier on, social media in some cases, especially in some of these more local races, was more than enough to tip the scales one way or the other on things. So that was a benefit in some ways. On the other side of that coin, though, when anybody has access to a massive platform, then that there is a dark side to that as well. There's a dark side. So not all ideas are created equally. I don't think, some things catch on, again, going back to this idea of anger driving a lot of the conversation, things that are designed to tap into that really create a situation that where you do see the dark side of that coin, right? Of both democratizing access and giving people who have good ideas. And I don't want to make a necessarily a moral judgment on good ideas versus bad ideas, but people who
I get exactly what you're talking about. And I think that's it's one of the real dark sides, as you said, of some of this stuff coming to roost with some of this, where it was like, hey, this is really great, you can do it. But then as the technology gets democratized, as it's easier and easier to do stuff, you can start to, you see some of the stuff now where you used to only try, as an example, you used to only trust what was on the big 4 news stations because, it was produced and all this other stuff. And now you can make something that looks legit like it's produced on that and be in your basement, and that can be, to your point, potentially a really good thing. You might hear voices that you wouldn't hear, but if somebody wants to really tap into it, and still in many ways, the way you get attention is by doing stuff that sends people off the rails. I've often told people, even just my own experience, I'm like, if I wanted to go viral, I'd have to completely change my brand, because being balanced and nuanced and talking through the complexity of stuff, that's not what goes crazy. It's the hype that really blows things up.
Yeah. Oh, exactly. You want to go viral when you want to get crazy. You want to go viral. I got something for you.
Yeah. Here we go.
Here we go.
Just drop it right in the middle and
Mask
then we'll just blow this up.
Yeah. Say goodbye to your career. But but in seriousness, that's right. Though you would have to change your brand. There would have to be some controversy. There's also some benefit also to being early on something, or moving quickly, which means oftentimes you're missing the facts, missing the nuance, missing critical pieces of the puzzle.
Yeah, because you don't want to be the 10th one to the game. You want to be the first. And that might mean I don't really know anything about this, but I'm going to go with it based on what little I have.
Oh yeah, exactly. And once the toothpaste is out of the tube, there's no putting it back in too. So once you go down that road, it's out there. So there definitely is that sort of dark side. It also creates a situation, I think, where in some ways it helped connect people at one point. Now we're becoming a little bit more walled off in our own little bubbles, both digitally and I think, in the physical world as well, because we pay so much attention to what's going on our phones, or cultivating a certain brand or persona, that we have for social media in a way that that's not always healthy necessarily, but it does.
No, on that one, what's interesting is, I think it's interesting you bring not only how it's affecting us in the digital world, but it's affecting us in the physical world as well. Because I was talking with someone about this the other day. I love studying human behavior and the way people do some of these things. And one of the examples was, it's a common example. Somebody was doing a baby shower, but then you watched what it was, and I'm like, you're not even present for your baby shower, because your baby shower is more about the social media, getting pictures and getting the right thing. You're not even actually present with the people there, or even present with the event itself, because it's a production more than anything else. And I'm like, that's concerning in some, like, I can see again both sides of that.
Yeah, I mean, I see some stuff that blows my mind every time I see it. Like, I'm not surprised, because I mean, there's so much of it out there, but also
you kind of can't be surprised anymore.
You're still like, I can't believe I just saw that though too. So there was one fun, actually, this was sort of making fun of a situation like that. So there was some video of someone like processing my worst breakup or something ever. And it's just like a video of that person like crying and like flailing about on camera, like, what should be a deeply emotional moment. And then it sort of cuts to another creator who is poking fun at that. So like, he's on the phone and goes, "Oh, my whole family died in a plane crash. Oh, okay, hang on." And then you see him pulling out a tripod and setting up a camera. He's like, "What? Okay, yeah, hang on just a second." And like, he sets up the phone and then has the emotional reaction.
Yeah.
After he's got the recording equipment set up. And I was like, wow, that's funny, but also like sad. There is sad, because there is a performative, like, people are going through deeply emotional things, and they're trying to find some outlet for it, but I don't know, it's just like a weird thing to see. I don't know, there was like another famous video where like someone was like dancing while captions on the screen explain like some horrible thing that happens, like her premature baby or something. It was like a very, like, the dissonance of that, like watching the seriousness of the captions and then seeing like the dance happen over it. I was like, this is very hard to watch, I think, in some ways, but there's a lot of that out there. I don't know, like, we're jumping the shark out of, like, I'm not sure.
Well, and it's just the dynamics of how that's affecting us as people, and even just our reactions to things. I was talking to somebody the other day about it, and they were talking about the fact that now when they're out, they live in a big city, and they're out and about, and they're like, I don't even, when I see something bad happen, or I even see something like, oh, there's $100 bill on the ground, like, I don't touch it, because I'm like, oh, somebody's going to jump out of somewhere and be like, it's a thing. And so I just don't. Like, somebody approaches me and goes, "Hey, I have a question for you." I'm like, nope, not talk. Like, it's actually changing physiologically the way people are emotionally responding to things, the way they're reacting to things, because they're just like, yeah, I don't know if this is real or if this is just a gag. Like, is this just a prop for some social media event, or is this, you're just doing it for content. I talked to somebody the other day. They're like, I was catching up with somebody, and then they came over and I was like, oh, this is like a content thing. Like, we aren't actually catching up.
Mm-hmm.
It's a content engagement.
Sure.
I didn't know that. I thought we were catching up, but I guess, oh, you brought your production crew and like and I'm like, wow, that's changing the nature of reality in some ways. And that has a profound effect on people.
It does. I mean, this idea of reality is really interesting. You know, again, when you and I firmly believe that it is having both, you know, mental health consequences. I mean, there's all sorts of research that points to that piece of it, but it's also having massive sort of political implications in ways that you probably wouldn't expect too, which is really fascinating. And I'm not talking about political, like overtly political content. I mean, this is something that I've been thinking a lot about recently. It's like, why do people feel a certain way about different issues, or like, why are younger voters, for example, why do they hold the attitudes that they have? And when I talk about younger voters, I'm talking about under 30, so I don't qualify anymore, in case you're wondering. But you know, us late 1900s people, you know, I was born in the 80s, so it's but yeah, that was a sad day when I no longer qualify as the
the youngest
voter.
generation.
Yeah, it's funny, but you know, it you know, time marches on, I suppose. But but you know, you start thinking about like, okay, like what is going on with younger voters, and specifically, like, one thing that I've been personally very interested in is like, what is happening with young men, right?
Yeah.
And there is a subset of young men who are developing deep resentments, I think. And I'll give you an example of why this might be. And this is all theoretical at this point. I mean, just kind of trying to piece it all together. But so I'm a man, right? Not like young by the definition of young voters, but like I'm 36 years old, right? And so I'm served all the content that like the algorithms think a 36-year-old man would like to see. And some of this stuff is really interesting. So this one video that I saw a few weeks ago, and I keep using this as an example whenever I have this conversation, because it's so extremely representative. It's like an extreme example, but it's very representative of the overall issue. So there are two people podcasting, two men, younger men, and one of them says, without a hint of irony or humor, if you are 25 years old and you haven't yet purchased a Lamborghini or been able to purchase a Lamborghini, you're doing something wrong. Think about that for a second. Dead serious. Now, a lot of people will go, oh, that's ridiculous, right? Like a large chunk of people look at that and go, oh, that's silly. There are a subset of people going, well, they're telling me that if I work hard, that if I hustle, if I take this course, if I do this thing or that thing, that if I'm 25 years old, I should be able to buy a Lamborghini. I mean, like, how many Lamborghinis?
And if I'm not, I'm doing something wrong. I'm failing as a human being.
Either I'm failing or
someone
society is failing me. Right.
Yeah.
And
one of the two.
That's
neither which are good for your mental health or just your overall attitude.
Exactly. So that's a terrifying place to be, because then once you start going down that rabbit hole, you start to hear stuff about finger pointing the finger at other groups, other people, saying, oh, those people are taking away your ability to thrive in this world. Or, it's sort of diversity initiatives are taking away your opportunity to thrive in this world. And none of those things are true, but it's like planting the seeds of resentment along the way.
Yeah.
And then it'll blossom into a big hateful tree at some point, because you've gone along thinking that if you work hard, you take whatever course is offered or whatever it is, you can own that Lamborghini, or you can fly in a private jet. By the way, a lot of those photos and videos are taken in a warehouse on a set in the middle of LA somewhere, right? It's not a real private jet. I promise you. Like, there are people who make a lot of money renting out the fuselage of a private jet, that people will go in there, they bring their bottle of champagne, they take their phone off to a business meeting and like wherever. Like, it's a whole illusion of a lifestyle that is unattainable, even for the person who is on social media taking that photo,
Yeah.
right?
No,
Or
I mean,
taking
there
that
are
video.
people I know who have an entire brand built around their success that are broke. Just straight up broke. But their whole brand and persona is about presenting this veneer that isn't real. And it's a almost just cognitive disconnect that I sometimes just go, what are we doing here?
Yeah, I mean, it creates a very bad environment. Like I had a situation a few years ago. I was out in San Diego, and at the hotel. So I'm not going to name names. I'm not going to throw anyone.
I don't either. I don't either.
Because I'm going to get some. I would get some real hate for saying this, but there was a particular influencer. I won't even name. Well, yeah. So I was out in San Diego. That probably won't aid in the identification. There are plenty of people in San Diego and California. So like I'm standing on the balcony of my hotel, and I notice so this particular person, with just videos and sort of monologues in and around things that are very expensive. So expensive homes, expensive cars, all this stuff. And I'm like, oh man, how does this person afford all of this? Right. Like, and so this is 2016. This is, I'm still, that type of influencer was still kind of a very new thing. I think it sort of burst. I was kind of bursting onto the scene at that point. So I'm just like watching this truck pull up a flatbed with a Lamborghini on the back of it. I'm like, well, that's an odd thing to have on a Lamborghini dropped off at a hotel. So then out from behind a wall somewhere, I see this person, this influencer walking up. They drop the Lamborghini off. Person gets in, drives away. So I'm like, I'm really curious about this. I got to go figure out what's going on here. So I go down, talk to the hotel attendant who is like standing there. I'm like, hey, what's up with that person? And they're like, oh yeah, they they rent a Lamborghini for 2 hours once every month and a half, drive it around, make videos, and then they return it to the Lamborghini company. So like the rental total cost is like $2,000 or something for a couple hours. And that's it. Like, so they don't own the Lamborghini. They're just renting it. Like, I mean, if I really wanted to, I could go rent a Lamborghini right now. Not that it would serve any purpose in my life necessarily, but like I could go do that.
You could have some viral Instagram clips.
Yeah, here in my Lamborghini, and then trust me, I know what I'm talking about, right? And that sort of lends some credibility. So that I was like, wow, that's wild that someone would think. I mean, it was a little naivete on my part, right? Like I was like, that's crazy that someone would do that, for fear of being found out. But they weren't. They're still around doing their thing, and I guess to their credit, they figured out the hustle a little bit. They figured out the move,
the fake it till you make it type of a thing.
Yeah, and it's always like a little bit of a red flag to me whenever you hear like, oh, I'm really good at business. It's like, well, what business are we talking about here? Like, what specific thing are we talking? Like, get into the specifics, because like running a business is like saying, yeah,
I like water, and you're like, well, I mean, what does that mean? To swim in, to drink? Like it could mean just about anything.
Oh yeah, 100%. So get specific. So, but like going back to this idea of what people see online, it breeds this sense of resentment, breeds the sense of you're entitled to something, or you have access to these things that most people will never have access to. I mean, for perspective, I think, and it could be wrong, so don't hold me to this number, but like how many Lamborghinis are sold in the US every year? Like it's got to be less than 100. I mean, and to 25-year-olds, that number is vanishingly small, if any at all.
Right.
I don't know any 25-year-old that would be able to afford a car that costs, six figure, even used, right? If we're talking about like a $90,000 Lamborghini.
Right. Certainly not for a daily driver.
No, not at all. I'm talking about cost of maintenance. Don't even get me started on that. I drive a Toyota. I love it. It's so reliable. I am such a nerd when it comes to that. I'm like, cost of ownership, like keep that down. Forget it. Like,
yeah.
I actually hate cars. As an aside, I cannot stand car. I'm not a car person. Yeah. I just like stupid things happen all the time to them, and it's like, why am I sinking so much? Like the one that's going to be cheapest when I take it in for an oil change is the one I'm going with. But anyway, the point being is like a lot of people don't feel that way, right? They want the glitz, the glamour, all of that. And why wouldn't you, right? Why wouldn't you want that? Why wouldn't you want to fly private? Why wouldn't you want to have the access to the yacht, to all of the opportunities that come with those sorts of things. So so it's creating the societal expectation, and then when that expectation is violated, we have a real problem. Someone's going to pay. Absolutely.
Somebody's got to pay. Right. And again, I think that's going back to our earlier point where you see this almost extreme ends of either you internalize that, which is why we see depression and suicide rates just skyrocketing. Either you just internalize and go, this is somehow a flaw in me, I'm somehow incapable. Or like you said, you go the other way and you go, it's someone else's fault.
Right.
And so they are an enemy to be dealt with. Or maybe, I guess it's a mix of both, but in either way, not healthy.
No, not healthy, not healthy at all. And it creates a terrifying political situation where you can tap into that resentment, right? And mobilize that in a way that's not productive. That creates a lower trust society, lower trust groups overall, creates additional isolation to the point where, you end up on some of these very scary, internet, like the darker corners of the internet where you see actual like sort of nationalistic, very like violently racist type areas. I mean, it's not just racism; it's a whole bunch of misogyny, all of these different things.
The extremism,
the
far
it's very
extremes of the corners.
It's very appealing, and what you start to see is that there is, to my eye, not a ton of counterbalance to that. Like, who is out there showing that a version of life that is attainable,
modest,
modest,
not modest in a certain definition, but is in like you said, attainable, realistic,
realistic, but also like in demonstrating or modeling fulfillment in life that is not tied to those specific material things. So
yeah,
someone who's out there showing volunteering for a couple of hours at your local, whatever it is, church or your local nonprofit or animal shelter, like that's a profoundly fulfilling thing. Or mentoring, kids who don't have access to mentors necessarily, or helping out, or tutoring kids at the locals, stuff like that, is extraordinarily fulfilling. And there's no one sort of glorifying that, right? Like there's no counterbalance to that.
Well, I think the unfortunate part on that one in particular is one, like I joke about all the time where I'm like, your posts don't go viral if you say, be kind to the person who's not very nice to you. Like nobody's going to be like, yeah, that. But I think the other thing that you hit on is the fulfillment that can come from some of those other things you talked about. In the social media age, there was a time, and there are certain instances where that did get attention, but then the very act of doing that suddenly became a production, because in order to get that same dopamine hit of, oh, hey, I just made this post about how I did this really awesome thing. Whoa, everybody liked. Now I got to go out and find a way to do it in a more public, more over the top way. So now maybe I'm going to go take care of the homeless, but I'm going to make a big show out of it so everybody can see how great I'm doing and it actually then robs you of the satisfaction and fulfillment that actually came from it, because now it's a veneer, it's a show. It's not even real anymore.
Right. It's nearly impossible to model that without falling into that trap, right? Like if you're like, even if it's just like the joy of having a hobby, like a basic hobby, like I like to play golf. Do I want to record my swing for everyone to see? Absolutely not. No one wants to see that. I have my good days and my bad
you're not
days.
Starting your golf channel on YouTube. Is that what you're saying?
This is my new plug. So here we go. It's gonna be very, very mediocre.
It's gonna be awesome.
Yeah. The mediocre golf channel. You can see me have my hot and cold days, and that'll in some colorful language out there. But
flubbing the balls into the rough and the sand traps.
That's it. So it's like pulling my shoulder from swinging because I'm getting into my mid 30s now, and sudden movements can be problematic for me. Like, oh, my knees hurt today. This is cool. So, but like I enjoy that hobby for the hobby. Like I don't want to be on my phone while I'm out there personally. Like, and it's hard for me too. Like it's hard for a lot of people to put the phone down and step away. And to your point about being present during a baby shower, being present during these other things, it's very hard for people to do that. Yeah. I'm coming to the point where like, I don't want to deal with my phone. I don't want to look at it. I don't want to have to think about it. So like even having the fulfillment of having a hobby, it doesn't have to be golf, but it could be like woodworking. It could be going for a walk. I love to go for walks, right?
Yeah.
And that doesn't need to be some kind of spectacle for people. You know what I mean? Like I don't need to like walk and talk to people. Now, do I recognize? So there is that sort of push and pull though, too, as like someone who is in, you know, I don't like to consider myself an entrepreneur, but an entrepreneurial space, like running a business, you know,
you have a moment of inspiration where there's something that hits you and you go, I want to say something about this.
It does. And I know that like there is some element of building a personal brand that is important. I'm the worst at taking my own medicine. I'll put it that way. So I have conversations with my business partner who is very good at reminding me of what we need to do. So like we dish it out all the time. Like, hey, you need to build your personal brand. You need to be out there. You need to, you know, create, let people know who you are, all that stuff. And I'm here going, oh, I don't want to do it. Like, don't make me turn on the, you know, don't put me on camera. What are you talking about? But he's like, you know, people can't hire you if they don't know who you are.
Well, it is this very uncomfortable space that we're in where there's a level of the game that you have to play.
Sure. Yeah.
But if you're not careful, that game will suck you in so fast, you won't even know what hit you. And if you go too far, it can feel impossible to get back out.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's back to your earlier point about like just kind of being normal and being knowledgeable and sharing those things in a normal kind of straightforward way. That's not very click worthy, right? You're not going to get a ton of likes off of that. That's just sort of the course of, yeah.
It's at least here's been my experience. And I don't even consider myself an influencer, but I post a lot on social media and some would say you've got a big following. So the way I look at it though, is like, I do it. The things I do because they're important to me and I care and whatever. And if nobody watched it, if nobody read it, it wouldn't matter. I would do it anyway. But even I have to almost have this self-routine check of like, hang on a minute. Am I feeling like I need to do something now because I haven't? And so I should, and I actually have to catch myself and go, nope, you're not in like, this is not the right time for you to do it then. Cause you're not actually in the right mindset. And that can be really hard. But what I've found is it's a slower burn.
It is.
Like, are you going to blow up?
That's
Are you
right.
going to blow up and be, you know, on the next red carpet event and whatever, because no, you're not.
Right.
You're not.
Right.
And
that's
I think
plan,
that's your point. You let me know how it goes with your golf channel, right?
Yeah.
Masters.
I've got backups too. I got other stuff. Yeah. So yeah, just keep throwing stuff at the wall until I walk that red carpet. I don't know what red carpet, but you know, just
it'll be red. It might be a car mat in my car, in your Toyota.
My very, very glamorous Toyota.
But I think the thing with it is, it also goes back to this impatience that we've built into our society, where it's like, I don't actually want to work for it.
Right.
I just want to be, I want the Lamborghini at 25.
Sure.
I don't want to be 60 and driving maybe a Ford Taurus with leather because it's nice and it's bigger and it's comfortable. I want the Lamborghini and I want it right now type of a thing. And I think that's the thing where, like, my experience has been, I'm never going to go viral. And I know that because like this stuff doesn't go viral, but it's for me meaningful because I don't do it for that. And I think that's one of the things that has been lost in the social media society we're in.
Right. Well, that's a really important point. It is a slower burn and it is work, and you do have to do it every day. And also with the recognition that some of the stuff people just like, there are things that I care about that I posted about that no one seems to care about. I think it's really interesting. Or like there's a super niche audience that just like isn't on LinkedIn or Twitter looking for that particular thing. It's something that would be very interesting at a conference or specifically in a one-on-one conversation, but not necessarily for social media. So you find those things out and you just have to kind of compartmentalize and say, okay, like no one cares about this. I do. That's
Right.
fine. I like that I care about it. And that's really all that matters.
Right. It made me laugh. I made myself chuckle. I thought I was
Yeah.
witty in this, but apparently nobody else did. And that's okay.
Exactly. So, I mean, so that's the hard thing is like it's very hard to model that sort of lifestyle that is attainable, that is, you know, fulfilling, that like even for the again, going back to this idea of like young men seeing all sorts of stuff, it's also too like there's this sort of pervasive idea out there that I think there's just like kind of undercurrent to some of the content where it's like you're not allowed to be a man anymore, right? Like a man who likes man things. And that's not true. No one's saying that. It's just, you know, people are saying like other people are different and can also live their fulfilling, most authentic lives. And so can you. Like if you're a man and you're into man stuff,
yeah, if you love
man stuff,
if you love jacked up trucks and going mudding and shooting deer,
hell yeah, let's do it. Yeah,
go for it.
You know, you're into it. Yeah,
put in a dip and go smoke a cigar, like whatever. But not everybody is.
Right. Exactly. Okay. I like man stuff. I mean, like you know, stuff that would be traditionally considered like again golf. I enjoy like I mean, women are getting in golf too, but like you know, it's like you know the trope, right? Like a trope, you know that men
the stereotype.
Into golf.
I mean, really the stereotype. Like this is what it is, and
and it's okay. Like it's okay. No one's saying you can't be that person. It's just like there has been a bit of a societal reckoning, and I think I know for the better that you can't be disrespectful in some way or force your will upon someone who's doesn't want it. I mean, that's just basic, decent human behavior. It's not you know, so just be a decent human and everything's going to be fine, I think. But that's the issue. It's like, then, you know, people feel like, oh, well, the world is telling me I can't be who I am, or I can't do what I want, and that's not true. That's not true at all. You can be who you want. You can do whatever you want. But also like at the end of the day, don't expect necessarily recognition for that stuff, like, or for everyone to like it. I mean, there are plenty of things that I don't like that I don't consume on a daily basis. And that's fine too. Like everyone has preference. I think we forget that people have preferences, and that's okay to have preferences, right? Like it's okay to not like something.
And to prioritize things and go, I like
100%.
this, but I don't like this as much as that.
Exactly. I mean, so I think it's a very difficult environment, and so it's leading down these sort of political pathways where younger people subsets of younger people are finding a home in some of these more isolating, angrier online spaces that are really creating a sort of dangerous situation, rather than thinking through how could we as a society improve so that everyone can at least have the basics in their life, and at least have equal access to opportunity, right? Not that everyone is going to ultimately rise to the same level at certain points in their lives, but at least the access to that opportunity is available to everyone.
Yep. Not everybody's going to drive a Lamborghini at 25, like all the influencers do, apparently.
Right. And again, I will go to my grave saying that, like, who wants it, right? Like, again, the oil changes in there. I mean, come on. Do you want it?
The thing is, so what's funny about the whole thing is, so I grew up in a funeral home.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, I've always had kind of a quirky perspective on this, because I watched people go their whole lives chasing after some of this stuff. And then they're put in the same 6-foot box, buried in the dirt. And you're like, okay.
Yeah.
Really? Like, was it really that important? Did it really get you everything you want? And, you know, if it did, and it was just because you just loved it, go at it. But I just saw way too many mistakes over the years.
That's really interesting. So, I mean, you feel like that gave you a lot of perspective on. Interesting.
Ton of perspective, because I went all these things that people spend their whole lives killing themselves over, stepping on everybody's back, destroying relationships, scorching the earth around them.
Yeah.
None of it mattered.
And you realize how short life can be too, for, you know.
Yeah. And that's another one where you're like, oh, I've got all these years, I'm going to burn and churn through it right now. You're like, man, I watch people get taken out decades before they thought. And you're like, so.
Yeah. I mean, well, yeah, I think, you know, it's
interesting. Something else that I was going to hang on to, though, with the point you made about society becoming angrier about this, it's almost one of these compounding problems, because to your point, you talked about the fact how it can draw you into these isolating corners, which actually then compounds the very problem that you're in, because now you're surrounded by
angry people,
the voices and the people who have this anger, or who are pretending to have this anger,
exploiting it.
They aren't even actually that angry, but they're pretending to be angry because that's what gets clicks and likes and whatever. And so you almost can be in this corner of people who are actually all being fake about how angry they are. And now you're all just angry. It's a very concerning environment that we're creating.
It is. And it filters down to even just like everyday life. So like, you know, as you know, as much as I think about sort of the national political implications of certain things like this, it also filters down to the community level. So I was actually talking to someone the other day who happened to be a therapist. And we were just talking about our local Facebook group that we have. So I feel like every community in the United States has like a Facebook group that focuses on, you know, community issues to the extent that that's even, or Nextdoor, right? Like another thing. And it just kind of came up organically. And she was like, you know, as a mental health professional, I'm a little bit worried for people's mental health in the way that some of these posts unfold. So we happen to live in the same street, and down the street, they built or had to build several buildings that would accommodate affordable housing. And certain people in our neighborhood, I don't know if it's in the end more of a street neighborhood, they lost their minds over it, right? Like they were very, very angry. Now I'll tell you what was sitting there prior to the construction of that affordable housing. It was a couple of dilapidated, abandoned homes. So like there was no one in it. Grass was growing, everything was falling over. And what is there now are two, quite frankly, well-designed buildings that are going to provide housing for a lot of people, mostly younger people who are going to be moving into this town, who are going to be walking up and down into the business district, spending money at restaurants and stores and creating a more vibrant community. But there was a subset of people who lost their absolute minds over this thing. And, you know, we were just talking about, it's like, you know, we actually don't care. Like people have to live somewhere. So why not in our neighborhood? We are very lucky to live in a beautiful place in this country with great schools. And there are a lot of people out there who do not have the opportunity. A lot of people in the world globally who do not have the opportunity to live in a nice place with nice schools, with you know, parks. I have a park that I could walk down the road to. I have a bunch of different restaurants that I could walk to from my house. I mean, genuinely a beautiful place to be. So why should we gatekeep that? Like people have to live somewhere, right? And I think that's so. But the reactions were frightening to that in some ways. Like there were some not even implications. There were explicit. Like there were a couple of people on there going, "Oh, well, you better lock your cars because car thefts are going to go up." I'm like, you really think someone's going to move in across the street from you and then steal your car? Like they live across the street from you. I'm sorry, it's just not going to.
Right.
Like they're going to be in your community.
And if you're really that worried about it, how about go get to know them?
Yeah. Well, I mean, also like, when was the last time you stole your neighbor's car?
Right.
Never? Right?
Yeah, exactly.
It's like, hey, Bill, you do? Hey, Bill, I see your car's missing there. What happened to it? I hope no one stole it.
Yeah.
It was me. You know, it was like, that doesn't happen. You know, it's absolutely crazy. So it's like stuff like that, or you see, issue. Oh man, this was a crazy one where there was a restaurant, and the owner of the restaurant, their landscaper just like couldn't make it one week, and he was busy, and the grass got like a little long in front of it, and people lost their minds, like, oh, this is an abomination, like as if you kicked a puppy or something. I mean, it really was like that. It was that bad. Like people are like, oh, this is an abomination. It's an eyesore. Like someone needs to be held accountable for this. And like, eventually, I guess it got back to the guy who owned the restaurant. He went on there and he's like, oh my God, I am so sorry. It's just like my landscaper ended up like getting injured or something, couldn't show up. And I'm going out to buy a lawnmower right now to like deal with this. I'm like, is that real? But you're really going to worry about grass? Like on someone, and it's in the middle, like not in the middle of a neighborhood. Even if you were worried about what your neighborhood looked like, I mean, what why are you worried about that? But it was 300 comments deep, most of them very negative, before the whole thing got taken down.
Well, and
by
I
the
think the
moderators.
scary part about it, and this is the part that can be overwhelming, is the enormous pressure that that puts on people. You know, I think of that restaurant owner who saw this for his own livelihood, out of fear, you know, felt the need to go buy a lawnmower and mow his grass. And there's a good chance that most of those 300 comments were not going anywhere. You know what I mean? They weren't actual people that went to the restaurant or anybody, you know, his business wouldn't have been affected, but it creates this enormous psychological pressure on people to go, well, 300 people are pissed at my grass is long. They might not even know my restaurant, but you're not thinking that way because you're just reacting to things. And I think that's some of the wisdom that we have to kind of retrain society on, is how do you operate in this? Because I mean, I'm curious your take, but I don't see a world where social media is going away. You know, people are like, oh, it's dying. And I'm like, I don't know that it's dying. It's coming back in different flavors.
Yeah, that's it. I think it is coming back in different flavors, right? Like it's just shifting. So, you know, it used to be vanilla and then it became like chocolate chip. Now we've got ourselves, you know, the brownie fudge, you know, whatever it is. Like, so, I mean, like yes, Facebook is not as dominant as it used to be.
Sure.
But I mean, the Facebook groups are still very active, right? For local issues, but
TikTok, Facebook isn't just Facebook. Facebook is Instagram.
It's Instagram, right?
So you're like,
Instagram, got Reels, which is the joke, I guess, is like two weeks late TikTok. I mean, basically with Instagram, Reel or TikTok for boomers or something. Is what the kids say. So, but yeah, you have that. You have TikTok. The algorithms on TikTok are scary good in terms of serving you stuff that you want to see, and there are definitely some very dark corners on TikTok as well. So, and if it's not TikTok and Instagram, it's going to be something else at some point. I mean, I think, you know, to the point, until we get to a point where people realize that there is life outside of our screens and our phones and all of that, social media is always going to be a thing. Even then, it will still be a thing because it's too easy to connect. So, I mean, the question is like, what comes next? I mean, who knows? Who knows what comes next? I mean, it could be something that's more immersive. It could be, you know, some recycled version of something that's already happened. But I don't think it's going away at all. So, you know, how do you deal with that, right? Like, I think to some extent, every school or a lot of schools should teach, you know, social media literacy. I mean, I remember we used to do typing classes, right? That was a big thing. Learn how to type.
Yep. Having speaking.
Yep. Yeah. That's right. Yep. Yeah. Many hours of my life spent doing that. And, but I think we should do social media literacy, and some schools are doing that. And I think that's very important to understand that if there is something that makes you feel angry initially, or that evokes an emotion, maybe take a step back and think about what that post is saying. Try to figure out if it's true, like whatever's in there. Because if something makes you like super angry, there's a good chance that what is happening is not actually happening, right? It's like not real, or it's some misframing or deliberate framing of an issue that you know is meant to evoke a sort of emotion. So
well, you know, Matt, that's actually the perfect transition to tell everybody about my masterclass that I'm doing. And you can sign up for my merch. I'm kidding.
Let's make them angry. Let's do it. Here we go.
Right. Here we go. I think, you know, I think the wisdom in what you said there, and I think this is some of the things that I encourage people along the way is, you know, there's this like, well, so which social media should I get off of? Or, you know, what? And it's like, that's not the solution. The solution is to figure out like what's going on inside of you. Like you said, like if something's making you angry, like, hey, rather than just going, I'm just going to delete Facebook. It's like, it's going to surface somewhere else. It's going to show up on Rumble, or I mean, who knows, whatever it is where it's going to pop. It's about figuring out like, hey, what about this is actually making me so angry, and how can I deal with it? And what can I do? And I think that's some of the stuff that I don't think the solution is we kill social media, because it's just going to come back in another flavor, and, you know, it'll be brownies fudge sundae type of a thing. And I think that's really, but being aware of it. And I think that's why this conversation was so helpful, because I think there's a lot of stuff we just talked about that people would go, like, I didn't know that. Like, I
Yeah.
wasn't aware that this is oh, wow. Now that I'm actually thinking about these trends, like I see that, or I even see myself in that, because you can't fix something you aren't aware of. And I think that's a big thing.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's 1,000% right. Like we just need to be cognizant of what's going on, and really understand what we're seeing, and the things that we're seeing may not always be the real thing. Right. And, I think that's super important, because it has, wide reaching implications for our society, our again, I go back to sort of this political thing because it's on everyone's mind, but it's true. Like our entire system of government, all of that is sort of colored by
Yep.
these things, the way that people are consuming information, and then forming opinions from that information. I think it's a really fraught time with
It is.
all of that. And it I mean, there's no shortage of things to worry about. I mean, that's the reality. And I think we're living through a time that's quite again, tumultuous, right? Like, and I think every cycle in history has that to some extent, but I think we're living through something now potentially. And I think the more awareness that we can have, and to the extent that we can pull back from that ledge, would be extraordinarily helpful in creating a better path forward for everybody. So it's
spot on.
It's frightening.
Well, and I think, one of the things that, again, it doesn't go viral because there's no like, take these 5 steps, do these 3 things to fix it. And I think the hard work is everybody needs to lean in and go, what does it look like for me? Because going back to the conversation we've been having, everybody's habits are different. Everybody's personalities are unique. And there's no like, so if you do these 5 things, then you can avoid all the risks of social media and what's happening. It's like, well, no, you just kind of got to do the hard work of looking in the mirror, which sometimes is the hardest thing to do.
It is. Yeah. And saying, that not every day is going to be a perfect day. Right. Like, and that's life. Right. I mean, I think there is some, and this is interesting. So like, as a communications professional, like when we're talking about strategy, because this sort of, it sounds like it might go a little further afield of what a communications professional would do, or someone that advises clients on how to brand and position themselves in the marketplace would do. But a lot of what we're doing is trying to help people better understand how to react to certain situations, and react more optimally to situations. Yeah. And I think there's like a bit of, sort of Eastern philosophy that is helpful in like understanding. Cause like, it's sort of like this idea of like life is suffering, but like, if you're suffering, that means you're alive, which is inherently a good thing, right? You're experiencing life. So you try to instill that. Like, we actually try to have these conversations with clients, like when something bad has happened, like especially with crisis management, like how do you respond? And there's always like there's always a window, right? That or 2 doors that you can go through. You can go through the one that's super unproductive and super angry, and you can react in a way that may be satisfying in that very moment, but won't help you long term. And then there's the door on the right where you can zoom out and you see the whole landscape, right? And I think one of the best analogies that I've heard on this is, when you're fighting a war, it's hard to see the whole battlefield when you're in the trenches, right? You're shooting at the other guy, the other guy's shooting at you. That's all you see. But if you can find a way to back up and get up on that hill, behind, you could see, oh wait, maybe it's not what I thought it was down in the trenches. Maybe I'm not seeing, maybe on the left, there's some other opportunity, or on the right, there's some other opportunity. So it's like, it's interesting to even from a client facing perspective, that's something that we do a lot, is trying to help zoom out and say like, okay, like let's take a deep breath and work through this. Because at the end of the day, like performance, right? The ability to perform optimally is extraordinarily important to communications. Like if you can't perform optimally, you're not going to communicate.
You don't communicate well.
Yeah. So that's a huge part of it. I mean, public figures, you're talking about executives, all these different categories of people, brands, even like you need to figure out how to sort of optimize a little bit and how to figure out performance and manage the emotional response, the things that are emotional, but the response doesn't need to be necessarily.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
Exactly. Man, I feel like this is the kind of conversation, this one in particular, I could probably do a Rogan-esque 4.5-hour conversation on this, because I think there is so much in this. And I think it's important, especially when you look at the statistics of what's happening with society right now. And if people don't prepare for it, and this isn't intended to scare people, but to say it's going to get worse. Like what I see around the technology sphere and what's happening with deepfake technology and AI, it's going to get worse. Mm-hmm. It's not going to get better. And so you can kick this down the road, but again, kind of like you can react emotionally, but it's not going to end well. So I really have enjoyed this conversation, Matt. And I have appreciated getting to know you through this and just sharing your perspective. And you've had quite a road. You've had an awesome story. And so thank you for joining me.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I really enjoyed this. And like you said, we could go on for a while. I mean, the deep fakes, the AI, that's a whole other like 2-hour.
That'd be a whole other episode.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you, Matt. And where can people find you?
I'm on LinkedIn. So I try to, keep my LinkedIn up to date. I'm, pretty deficient in that area. And then, but I try to post as much as I can, whenever we have something interesting to share. Twitter, I aspire to tweet more. Maybe that's not a good aspiration, but I'm trying to just tweet more. Maybe not engaging like back and forth, but just posting stuff that I find interesting and maybe no one else will, but that's fine.
Sounds good.
It's part of the game.
Good.
So,
well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks everybody for listening or watching, however you chose to consume it. And we will see you on the other side.